Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that we are streaming and we are recording, and you may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Good evening, councilors. Good evening, SLT, and good evening to the viewing public. I see that we have quorum, so I will call into session this regular council meeting for Tuesday, June 7th at 5:30 p.m. And as usual, we will start the meeting off with the land recognition statement, and it will be read by our clerk.
We begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And before we approve the agenda, I would like to, with Council's indulgence, make a sad announcement, if I may. We lost a great citizen and a great athlete on May 21st, 2022. The death of Jane Carolyn Haste. The lady passed away at the Douglas Memorial Hospital on Saturday, May 21st, after a brief battle with cancer. Jane is survived by her mother, Dorothy, and brother, Gary. Jane was a member of the Canadian track and field team and represented Canada in the Montreal 1976 Olympics. During her career in sports, she represented her high school track and field team and went on to compete around the world, including Australia, New Zealand, Russia, Israel, Mexico, the Ukraine, Sweden, Norway, the United States, and many more. In 1974, she competed in Commonwealth Games in New Zealand and won gold medals in women's shot put and discus. In 1975, she won a bronze medal at the Pan Am Games in Mexico City. She also competed at the University of Tennessee from 1977-1979 and was an All-American in 1977 and 78, winning the AIAW National Championship in discus. In her first year, she tossed a collegiate record in discus that still stands at the University of Tennessee right up to today. So condolences to her family for their loss. I knew this lady during high school. She was 2 years ahead of me. She was a very humble, quiet person, but when she was on the field, she bared her teeth, and she was one heck of a competitor. Condolences again to her family for their loss. I will be bringing a notice of motion concerning this individual later on in the meeting. Thank you for that, Council. Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the agenda for the June 7th, 2022 regular meeting of council be adopted as circulated. To you, Mr. Mayor, to call for any amendments.
Okay. Councillors, I see right off the hip-hop, Councillor Wink.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to include in the agenda notice of motion as agenda item 14.3, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that's a motion to amend the agenda, and I do have the mover as Councillor Wink, and we would be looking for a seconder.
Okay. Is there a seconder on this? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we do have that motion put on the floor, and council can debate, or I can call the vote.
Okay. Any discussion on this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Counselor Olson,
Yes.
Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. You may call for any other amendments if there
Okay.
are.
Is there any other amendments proposed by any other councillors? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to the main motion as amended. To you, Mr. Mayor, if you have any discussion.
Okay. On the main motion, is there any further discussion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For clarity, I will be using the same mover and seconder, so that's Counselor Wink and Counselor Hildebrandt. The vote here begins with Counselor Hildebrandt.
Yep.
Counselor Kaur.
Yes.
Counselor Olson.
Yes.
Counselor Wink.
Yes.
Counselor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. And that does bring you to the disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Okay, thank you. After viewing the agenda, does any councillor have any pecuniary interest or general nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will so note. Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your first presentation, and we do have the COVID-19 pandemic update from the fire chief and the CAO.
Okay, thank you. Chief Limburner, you have the floor.
Thank you, through Mayor and Council and FLP members, just a brief update. Across the region, actually across the province, our numbers continue to wane quite a bit. Pelham, we don't have a lot of active cases. Our active rate is down to 1.6. The region is reporting active cases in the single digits on a daily basis. The hospital systems continue to improve greatly. The number of ICU and ICU ventilator patients is continually decreasing on a daily basis. Public health has one active outbreak. Our positivity rate is continuing to go down also. So across the board, vaccinations continue to increase, numbers continue to go down, and if we continue doing what we're doing, wearing our masks when we have to, and hygiene and so forth, we're going to get to a good spot. So there's not a lot to report. Our meetings region-wide and municipal-wide have really gone down also. So if council so wishes, the CAO and I had discussed this, and we felt it would be best if we cease doing these updates every council meeting. And if there's any changes or updates, then the CEO can just brief you on them. So that's the end of my report.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And I see Councillor Olson has a comment or question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment. My sound appears to be dropping some of the words from the clerk and from the chief. I wonder if I can follow along, but I have to make up the words myself sometimes.
Yep, we'll take a look. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I would just ask if any other members of council are experiencing the same issue. I'm seeing some no's. So Councillor Olson, please do let me know if this continues. In the meantime, I will contact our IT to see if there's anything on our end.
Councillor Olson?
I didn't hear all that comment that the clerk just made, so.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Olson. I will just connect with our IT. It appears that this may be on your particular end, but I will contact IT and see if there's anything that we can do on our end to help assist you, because certainly we want you to be able to hear the meeting. Thank you.
It must be a technical problem. It couldn't be a pilot error, that's for sure.
No, of course not. Thank you, Councillor. Keep us informed if, like we say, the rest of the councillors are indeed hearing the chief, so it leans that it might possibly be at your end, perhaps. But keep us informed as the meeting goes. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the chief's report? Not seeing any. Thank you, Chief, obviously, for bringing these continued low numbers to us. Obviously, with the onslaught of summer and more outside activities, let's hope these great numbers continue to happen. Thank you, Chief. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This is a joint report. The CAO is also, I'm not sure if he has any other comments he'd like to add.
Okay. Mr. CAO, please.
I do at this time. Council, in the year 2015, Charlotte Tunakaitis was hired by the town of Pelham to be our deputy treasurer. She did that really well, so well that she also became our manager of financial services. So she grew from deputy treasurer, and manager of financial services. And Charlotte has been instrumental in transforming and modernizing the town's financial system and frankly our financial position. She's played as large a role as anyone in so doing in the past 7 years. To the point where tonight, as one of the reports on the agenda indicates, we have only one reserve in the red, and that was about a dozen at the time you were elected. So there she is, smiling, beaming face. It is my, of course, it's a sad announcement that Charlotte is leaving us because, frankly, she has the opportunity, the time, the talent, the capacity, and the inclination to be a great treasurer. And there's a municipality well west of us on the shores of Lake Huron that's going to benefit immensely from her talents. So this will be Charlotte's last meeting with us. And I just thought she probably deserved a round of thanks for 7 years of excellent service. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the major role she played in us migrating software systems to the current vendor, which is a Herculean task. But the last budget, the last two budgets, in fact, were done on that software, and you'll notice it had a lot more analytical capacity and was, I hope from your end, a lot easier to work with. And so that, although it takes a whole team to do that, and I'm sure Charlotte would point that out, that is true, but it's also true that a team needs a leader, and that leader was Charlotte. And for those reasons and more, she was obviously the very best candidate to become the next treasurer for the municipality of Bluewater. So bad day for Pelham, good day for Bluewater, and those are my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Perhaps we'll let the guest of honor tonight, Charlotte, any words you'd like to say before you leave us?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. You know I like to be in the background here, but I agree with the CAO's comments. I'm happy that there's one reserve left in the red and excited about that direction. I just want to thank Council and SLT. I know Teresa's not here to hear, but she has been a wonderful mentor for me as well. And I just want to thank you for the support, and it's been my honor to serve Pelham.
Thank you very much for those words, Charlotte. I see Councillor Olson, comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to Charlotte. Somebody who knows me well say I take a grandfatherly role or a grandfatherly attitude to members of the staff, and she's right. You know, one of the things that you learn as a grandfather is to suspend judgment. So I've suspended judgment on you leaving us, but I really want to commend you on you benefited greatly from your outstanding technical skills that I know as a chartered accountant myself, I know that you are a very skilled practitioner and a credit to the profession. And I also wanted to recognize your excellent leadership presence and your leadership example for younger staff. We've benefited from this, and they have benefited from your, I think, wonderful and important mentoring role that you've taken on. And we're going to miss you, but I know you've made the proper choice for your career and for your family, and wish you the best for everything.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors want to have a few words at this time? Councillor Wink.
Yes, so it's been my privilege to be part of the Finance and Audit Committee, and we keep on getting accolades for Charlotte from our external auditors, who highly praise Charlotte for all her cooperation, her great work, and I think when I look at our finances at the beginning of our term and where we are now and where our reserves are now, it goes to the great dedication of our staff, particularly the finance staff, and particularly Charlotte. And I certainly am going to miss Charlotte and her exemplary work that she's done for the town. I also said that there may be a day that there's a door opening that she can return. So I wish you all the best, Charlotte, and thank you for all that you've done for our town and the staff. So all the best.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kaur.
Yes, thank you, Charlotte. We're definitely we're gonna miss you. You got big shoes to. We're gonna have big shoes to fill, and obviously, I know you're gonna enjoy where you're going, and again, thank you very much for making our town better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Hahn.
Yes, Charlotte, you've always been a smiling face no matter what the climate is. I know we've had ups and downs in this council, in this term of council. It's been some struggles, but you've always persevered and you've put us back on top. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the very best in your career.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Charlotte, thank you again. With Teresa and yourself at the helm of our financial system at the town, we had supreme confidence that we would be able to work ourselves up through the cooperation and the excellent work that both of you contributed to the results. I can't tell you how proud I am to say thank you so much for all you've done. You're such a treasure. God bless you, and may He be with you as you progress on in your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll sign off then, Charlotte, and just again, on behalf of this council, we really do appreciate the work you put into our budgets and making this town a better place. And I know I speak on behalf of all residents that they also appreciate and thank you for the work you've done on their behalf. Thank you very much, and all the best in the future. Thanks. Madam Clerk.
Through Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from B. Limburner, Fire Chief and Community Emergency Management Coordinator, and D. Cribbs, Chief Administrative Officer, for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any other discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments on the COVID report? Not seeing any, Madam
Thank
Clerk?
you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your delegations. We do have a registered delegate here tonight, and that is Mr. David Hayworth, and he is here from the region, and he will be speaking to you about the Niagara region's new regional official plan. Mr. Hayworth is in the meeting now, and he may unmute himself and put on his screen. Oh, there he is. I do see him, and if you'd like, sir, I can share my screen for your presentation if you wish.
Yes, thank you very much.
One moment, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hayworth, you have the floor when you're ready.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and public. I'm happy to update you on the recommended Niagara official plan. The Niagara official plan has taken a balanced approach with respect to growth management. Niagara is made up of unique communities which had to be considered in the development of the Niagara Official Plan. Next slide. There are key interest areas to address in the Niagara Official Plan, namely our natural environment system, improving our mapping and policies with respect to the environment, our response to climate change, a policy response to climate change, improving our housing mix. That's a greater supply of housing of all types, particularly more medium and higher density development in the proper areas. Improving our economic competitiveness by protecting employment areas that are regionally important and having criteria for conversion of other employment lands. And our planning framework, we operate in a two-tier planning system with our local municipal partners, and we want as clear policies as we can and to work with local planning departments in streamlining processes and clarity on policy interpretation. Next slide. So the growth allocations of the Niagara Official Plan and the identification of where growth will be focused informed the region's water, wastewater master plan, transportation master plan, and development charges to ensure servicing infrastructure can support growth, people can travel from home to jobs appropriately, and growth pays for growth. Next slide. So the policies of the official plan are built on pillar statements derived from theming of areas of public interest from broad-based consultation that has taken place over the years. And these were confirmed through surveying of regional council members. And you can see them on this slide. Next slide. This slide identifies the key chapters of the Niagara Official Plan and sections for the chapters. There is also an introduction and implementation chapters, site-specific policy chapters, of course, a glossary of term or definition of terms, schedules, and appendices. So on this slide, you can see these core chapters and the various policy sections that are within each core chapter. Next slide. Climate change is a section that represents policy integration in the plan. It pulls together policy directions throughout the plan. In other sections shown below are some of the examples in the slide. This section also commits to further strategy work, such as a greening strategy, climate modeling, and an adaptation strategy. Next slide. In its simplest form, the Niagara Official Plan identifies what we will protect, how and where we grow, and the systems or policy tools that help provide for the management of those. Next slide. In terms of what we protect are resources important from either an ecological or climate change or food supply or heritage or economic perspectives. And you can see them listed on the slide. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to highlight the natural environment system and agricultural schedules because those have been of particular interest to the broader public. Next slide. Regional Council selected option 3C from among several different natural environment system options. And this option was the most stringent option in terms of protecting our natural environment system. And you can see the key components of the natural environment system on the slide. There has been significant consultation on the natural environment system mapping and policies. A PIC was held on February 10th, a broad-based public information session. And on February 17th, a session was held for property owners within urban areas with newly mapped natural environment features. Over 1,700 letters were mailed out to these property owners, and about a little less than 150 letters were mailed to property owners within the urban area in Pelham with newly mapped environment features. Next slide. So this map identifies from a broad regional perspective, you can see the natural environment system coverage within Niagara. You know, the gray areas are basically your urban settlement areas. You can see all the provincially significant wetlands on the slides. Of course, there's significant woodlands, etc. And, you know, often that comes more prevalent as you zoom in. And we have a mapping tool feature that allows the public to have zoomed in and look at their property in more detail and comment on that through the process. Next slide. This is a schedule. This represents one of the schedules in the official plan and reflects our agricultural land base. There's agricultural policies to protect the agricultural land base and comply with the Greenbelt Plan. And you can see the areas of specialty crop, of prime agricultural lands, and of course our Niagara Escarpment Plan area. Next slide. So how we grow. In the next 30 years, Niagara will grow by a little over 200,000 people, 85,000 jobs. And we're targeting an overall regional intensification rate. That's an overall regional intensification rate of 60% within our existing built up areas. And despite that, there is a community need for more land through expansions, and those expansions represent about 1% of the regional land base. Next slide. So these slides, this slide and these two charts identify the growth that's expected per municipality, the number of units over the next 30 years, and the intensification rate. So you can see Pelham is approximately in the middle of those two charts. The Niagara official plan directs Pelham to target an intensification rate of 25% for 2051. That is up from the current regional official plan target of 15%. For context, however, Pelham has averaged an intensification rate of 23% since 2015. Development within the built boundary will become a focus as major designated greenfield area developments in Fawn Hill and Fenwick build out over the planning horizon of the plan. Next slide. Yeah, next slide, sorry. Thank you. There's no strategic growth areas identified in Pelham from a regional perspective, but the town can identify local corridors and nodes for intensification areas within their official plan. So some of the regional strategic growth areas where we're directing about 30% of, a little over 30% of all regional growth are downtown St. Catharines, which is a provincial growth center, the GO station areas of Grimsby, St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, and of course Lincoln, regional growth centers, which is downtown Niagara Falls and Welland, and as well as the South Niagara Growth Center, which is around the future hospital site in Niagara. And again, we have identified specific employment areas for protection over the long term regionally, and we're looking for increasing housing mix. We want to increase our housing supply. We have to plan for market demand, which does include singles and semis, but we obviously want to increase our housing supply. We know that doing that in more medium and higher density forms of housing can help somewhat assist in addressing affordable housing and age in place. Next slide. So I've talked about briefly about expanding urban boundaries, and when we look at that, the region needs to look at the land supply to accommodate growth to 2051 as part of the municipal comprehensive review. So we look at what land is needed, do we need more land, and then where should those expansions be? So we look at criteria as well. Next slide. So the other component that we consider in all this is regional structure. And I talked about, we're really trying to obviously direct growth to urban settlement areas and within the designated greenfield areas in those urban settlement areas, which is 50 people and jobs per hectare. And then of course the darker purple, which is the delineated built up area. And that's where the 25% intensification target for Pelham would be directed to. Next slide. So we did an overall land needs assessment, which followed a provincial methodology and resulted in community land needs in West Lincoln, Niagara Falls, Fort Erie, Pelham, talk about that, a small employment area in Welland. Next slide. So after determining community land needs, we had to look at criteria, as I mentioned, to assess where should the expansion areas be located within those communities that have a need. So these are all the criteria that we looked at. And the criteria determine where the expansions will be located in those communities. Specifically, a very important element was the impact on the natural environment system and the agricultural system were very critical criteria that were part of this process. And I want to bring to the attention to that where there's an expansion and there's a natural feature, let's say within the proposed expansion area, and that's brought into the urban area, that feature, that natural environment feature will be protected in accordance with the natural environment system policies of the plan, as the existing natural features within the urban areas would be protected as well. Next slide. So based on the land needs assessment, it was determined that the town of Pelham requires an additional 40 hectares of community area land to accommodate population and employment forecast in the designated greenfield area. The Greenbelt Plan area surrounds the majority of Font Hill and Fenwick, which limits the ability to expand all 40 hectares in Pelham. And a portion, 10 hectares of the expansion lands, are proposed within the city of Thorold, just adjacent. This provides an opportunity to comprehensively plan for this area and consider environmental and servicing requirements. So we actually have in the recommended official plan a site-specific policy area to coordinate the development you see in green for Pelham and the Thorold area. The overall developable area of the eastern expansion is 25 hectares. The overall developable area of the southern expansion is 15 hectares. Next slide. So this slide kind of shows where we are in the process relative to the settlement area expansions. We did our land needs, we established criteria, we assessed them. We've been getting consultation feedback. Expansion areas were incorporated into a draft consolidated plan that was put out for consultation. Then the proposed plan, which was part of a formal statutory open house and public meeting. And now, of course, the recommended plan that's going to regional planning. Next slide. So I talked about, the official plan in its simplest form looks at what we protect, how and where we grow, and the policy tools in a sense to help manage that. So this slide depicts some of those policy tools. We have district plans and secondary plans. You're probably familiar with the Brock District Plan and the Glendale District Plan, where there's a lot of growth being planned for in those areas. And secondary plans are, in a sense, a blueprint for how a community can grow and develop over the long term, strategically identify its intensification, look at protecting areas, and are great for larger undeveloped greenfield areas where you can do some planning on a comprehensive basis and integrate sub-watershed planning as well. Urban design is another tool which helps the intensification particularly blend in with communities and also blend in properly and have a proper interface with the public realm. Okay, we've also have infrastructure and transportation policies, as well as sub-watershed planning, which is really important to look at larger areas where you can identify comprehensively the type of development you're thinking of and what the impact will be on the natural environment system. To help with municipalities look at intensification, which we know is sometimes a challenge where you have intensification going to existing areas. We do have policies that allow the municipalities to provide that intensification where they see fit within the built up areas, just as long as they're planning to meet the target that's provided to them. Next slide. So these are the outcomes that we hope materialize from getting the Niagara official plan adopted and approved and onto the implementation stage. Addressing affordable housing opportunities. We have affordable housing targets and policy tools. Climate change adaptation and mitigation. We have, like I mentioned, specific climate change related policies throughout the plan and a section that kind of pulls all that together. Efficient use of infrastructure, investment in public amenities, protection of the natural and rural systems, and support for economic development. We've aligned the official plan with the region's economic development strategy. Next slide. So the official plan is going to go to Planning Committee June 15th, recommended for adoption. I want to stress that once the official plan is adopted by the region, it goes to the province for approval. And once it's approved by the province, the local municipalities then bring their plans into conformity. But I would stress that the official plan is not a static document, okay? It's not frozen in time and something you have to completely live with for the next 30 years. After adoption, it can be updated to address changing trends, policy performance, impact of innovation, or outcomes from future work. We're going to monitor, the Niagara official plan will be monitored to address policy performance, and we'll be working closely with our local planning partners to work on the data, et cetera, to help monitor the performance of policies and comply with the provincial growth plan, et cetera. And the region is developing guidelines to assist the local municipalities with bringing their official plans into conformity with the next slide. So as I mentioned, we've advanced quite far in the timeline here, and we are recommending, we have a recommendation report with recommended plan going to Planning Committee next week, June 15th. And should it go through that process, it would go on to council. We're looking to transfer the adopted official plan, hopefully, adopted by regional council to the province for the July 1st provincial deadline. Next slide. And with that, that completes the presentation and certainly available to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Hayworth. I will now open up to council. Any comments or questions to the presenter? And I see Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Hayworth. Obviously, there's been a ton of work put into this by many, many people, and it's nice to see that this is coming to fruition. One of the opportunities you indicated was affordable housing. And there's a lot of discussion about affordable housing, but nothing seems to be getting done. It seems that any multifamily development is geared to condo ownership. The rental market is underdeveloped. What measures do you suggest to provide affordable housing to people in our municipality?
Through the mayor to the councillor, that's a really good question. I would start out saying we have some affordable housing targets that we want municipalities to plan for in terms of housing ownership and rental, and 10 and 20% correspondingly. and some basic policy tools that the local municipalities can incorporate in their official plan. I will stress this, I guess. One of the things we had Cancia consulting firm do some study work on getting the data that we need and what our core housing need is. So we have affordable housing under provincial policy, which is, you know, up 30% of your income spent on housing, et cetera. But there's also like core housing need, people in need of housing with even lower incomes than that, et cetera, right? And what they found out was we really need to grow. First of all, if the core housing need will get worse if we had a slower growth than kind of like the status, the norm. And if we meet the provincial requirement, we'll basically kind of keep that core housing need about the same. And that's growing and increasing the types of housing that we need in terms of more medium and higher density forms of housing, different forms of housing. That's really key. There's some municipalities where there's protected major transit station areas that can do inclusionary zoning. And there's also municipalities can have policies in their plan to allow for community benefits to incorporate more stringent policies to look at requiring affordable housing. I will say this, the official plan and land use planning is certainly can play a role in providing for affordable housing, but there's so many other programs. And regionally, we've been looking at the issue comprehensively. We had our official plan align with the region's housing and homelessness action plan, but there's so much more. You know, a regional council, like in terms of looking at incentive programs, one of the criteria, one of the major topic areas was affordable housing for that. That has to all be developed, of course, and more. It's really a comprehensive strategy with social housing, the official plan, the financial aspects. All have to be considered together to really address this problem.
Councillor?
So, yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So do you see the region incenting developers or municipalities to provide this type of housing?
Through the mayor, the councillor, I can't speak to that myself, but that is something I'll certainly take back and provide to others, and they can reach out to you with some more definitive information on that.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, one more question, please.
Yep.
Through you to Mr. Hayworth. In the 30-year projections, what is the region's plan to expand water and wastewater facilities?
Through the mayor to the councillor, specifically overall within the region, obviously Niagara Falls is one area right now with the treatment plant out there. But overall, we want to coordinate the growth that we're planning for the municipalities and where the growth is going to be concentrated. Obviously, I mentioned Niagara Falls is one of the key areas. But overall, like we have to factor into where your expansions are growing, that servicing will be provided out there, coordinate with the local municipalities, but regional infrastructure is the key, and the concentration out there right now is Niagara Falls. Our growth allocations would be considered by or put into the local official plans, so the local municipalities can then plan for the growth. And you would be looking at your servicing relative to those areas as well. One of the policy approaches we have is, encouraging the use of secondary plans, so that when you're looking at it from a community, a broader neighborhood perspective as to where growth is going to happen, you can coordinate that with your transportation planning for that area and infrastructure planning for that area as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. The master transportation plan, which is, I think it's 2017, states that by 2041, the motorized vehicle traffic will grow by 55%. Is that an updated number, or is that a number that's going to be built into our planning? Because we're now faced with all sorts of things, with congestion on the roads and speeding and all sorts of impatient driving, and certainly parking is always an issue with our council. So 55% is the number that's in the plan. Is that going to be revised, reviewed, or what?
Through the mayor to the councillor, that's a good question. So our transportation master plan, the current one, plans to 2041, and we'll be updating that transportation master plan to 2051. So we'll be reviewing that issue as well as other transportation issues relative to 2051 as we move forward. And partly the important elements were these growth allocations that are in the recommended official plan to be used in updating those two master plans.
Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And another sub area in the master plan is Area 3, which is it was described as Port Robinson, Rice Road, Merritt Highway, or Merritt Road area. And there's a couple of capacity improvement projects there, which they come up Merritt Road and the extensions of Merritt Road and the upgrades of Rice Road across the Thorold Road. Those are areas of concern for Pelham, I would think, because the amount of vehicle traffic that's going to be coming into that part of the community. Is that still a part of the plan as you know it, or? I think we've been doing consultations with it.
Through the mayor to the councillor, that is something, obviously, if it's in the existing plan, it's going to be reviewed, but in the context of, where's the additional growth in that other 10-year time frame going to be happening, et cetera, what would be needed in the area that you're referring to. What I'll do is I'll take it back to the transportation people and have them reach out to you and give you an update on it.
I see the town planning director, Ms. Weens, would like to speak on this. Go ahead, Ms. Weens.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. What I can also advise is that the region is currently in the process of doing environmental assessment study and review with respect to improving the Merritt Road and Rice Road improvements. It's part of the EA to have the Merritt Road extension go through. So they're looking at those capacity requirements and improvements to that now as through their environmental assessment process. And once that is completed, then they will be proceeding on to detailed design and ultimately budget approval for that. So it is something that is in the forecast now for Merritt Road and Rice Road improvements.
Thank you,
Ms. Weens. Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one last comment. Clean Air Partnership has made some recommendations for the official plans in Ontario, and one of them was that they adopt a greenhouse gas emissions standard and the reduction target. And we're all fairly familiar with 50 by 30, which is a local. Well, it's not a local group; it's a cross-Canada group, and backed by some pretty significant research that we have to reduce. We have to go on a carbon diet, and we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by the year 2030. Do you have direction from regional council to develop such a plan, like a climate adaptation plan or a climate community emissions plan or anything like that?
Through the mayor to the councilor. So as I mentioned, we've included policies and we'll be working on a strategy. The official plan does make commits to a greening strategy, the development of an adaptation strategy that you mentioned. So that is something we'll be looking at. And that group that you're referring to did come in as a delegation to the public meeting and spoke. We've also incorporated some stronger policy language relative to feasibility, looking at feasibility for district energy, et cetera, and looking at energy plans as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Hayward. The question I have, would there be any impact to this plan if the region goes down to 6 from the 12 municipalities?
I think that our planning for growth is planning based on a regional perspective, the communities themselves. We've proposed expansions in the areas with community needs. I can't hypothetically talk about what would happen. I don't even know what the municipalities would be, what the situation would be. I have to plan based on, or the region has to plan based on what's in front of us right now. And we're looking at working with 12 municipalities. Like I said, the plan is not static. We'd have to review it at the time. As I mentioned, the plan's not static. It can be updated, it can be reviewed, and likely there'd have to be updates. What they would be, I don't know. It depends on the situation.
Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again to Mr. Hayward. So it's a 30-year plan, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Through the mayor to the councillor, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Oh, let's see, Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Mr. Hayward, thank you again for the presentation. I'm going to be addressing the official plan specifically as it affects the town of Pelham. So your urban expansion for the town of Pelham looks like it's just south of Quaker and east of Rice. My summary of this report says infill is where the region is saying most of the growth will occur in Pelham, with the region responsible for stormwater and sewers. Is this an accurate summary based on the few comments I've made?
All right, through the mayor to the councillor. So the region's responsible for, waste management, the treatment facilities, et cetera. Regional trunk mains, et cetera. And making sure, like the end of pipe at treatment facilities, there's capacity, et cetera. We work with the local municipalities on the servicing for the expansion areas. A lot of that obviously would be local services that would be going to those areas. And that's why looking at our growth allocations, incorporating them into the local official plans and looking at it comprehensively at the local level to determine what's needed at the local level and kind of drilling down. So everything kind of drills down further as we move along the process.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. Well, from my observation, in the 70s, we were looking at 30 people in jobs per hectare, I believe. Now we're at approximately 50 people in jobs per hectare. The question revolves then about municipal services and the plan, the official plan, and how the stormwater and the sewers react to that official plan. It's easy to put the 50 people and jobs per hectare on the land. The technical difficulty I see is adjusting and designing the stormwater and sewer systems to handle this new intensity. Because I'm concerned that the under the ground part of the plan is far more important than above the ground plan and the technical nature of that. And how are we assured that the region has taken the proper analysis in the official plan to deal out those responsibilities?
Through the mayor to the councillor, so there's servicing analysis that are part of the future developments in order to address that. From the 50 people and jobs per hectare you mentioned, that's greenfield areas, which are kind of your, generally speaking, your larger, more undeveloped areas where you're kind of planning on a fresh canvas, so to speak. The intensification rate that was referred to, which is 25% for Pelham in the built up areas, we're encouraging the local municipalities to use secondary planning for to strategically identify where areas of intensification can go, or intensification strategies to locate those as part of their official plan. And they would be at that time looking at their servicing and where that intensification can go within the built up areas.
Councillor?
So are you saying that the local planning department is responsible for sewers and stormwater management in terms of this intensification? Say there's an apartment building comes in and they want to develop 95% of the land area. Then you have a lot of stormwater and sewers capacity that's required for that. You keep on doing that over and over again in the intensification area. Obviously, eventually your systems, you know, they're at capacity or over capacity.
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, the region has a role in reviewing stormwater management plans as well, and partly to consider things from a broader perspective. But I think the aspect is to, when you have the allocations, you have the intensification rate, you have your larger greenfield areas and you're planning on it from a comprehensive perspective, that's the opportunity to look at those areas in collaboration with the region and properly plan for it so everything's aligned.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors other than Councillor Olson? Because everyone's gone through once. I have a question myself I would like to ask Mr. Hayworth. I don't see any other councillors. So before I go back to the second round, Mr. Hayworth, the official plan, I believe, has expanded many urban boundaries. And I believe, and correct me if this number is correct or what have you, that the official plan is including 2,500 acres of farmland into urban boundaries. If indeed this is a flexible plan, I'm wondering, and I realize this was asked at regional council, but I don't know if staff has done anything with this. If it is indeed a flexible plan that can be reviewed every 5 years, was there any thought given that instead of putting this number of productive farmland into urban boundaries, to lower that number and obviously review it again in 5 years? Any comment on that, please?
Yes, and that question's come up to the mayor. That question's come up. We're required to plan for growth to 2051. We're required to do that. Our land needs assessment needs to factor in market demand as required under the growth plan. So we can't just plan for medium and high density only. We have to provide some planning for other forms of housing for market demand purposes. So we factored all that in. As I mentioned, we factored in a regional intensification rate that averages out to 60%, which is above the provincial requirement of 50%. Despite that, we still need more land in certain communities to address their need. And you know, the other aspect to it too to consider is without the expansions, the intensification rate, the overall regional intensification rate would go higher. And particularly in municipalities, you know, some municipalities that can't grow it at all because of the Greenbelt plan and they already have high intensification rates, Grimsby, Lincoln, St. Catharines. The other municipalities where the intensification rate's not as high, if there were no expansions, that would be much higher. So you would be looking at all the typical issues you have when you have an intensification development going into established neighborhoods, et cetera. It would be somewhat exacerbated by even a higher intensification rate. So we've tried to take, as I started out with the presentation, a very balanced approach with respect to growth management and dealing with everything. We have a higher intensification rate than what's required by the province. There's only certain communities where we're expanding the boundaries, basically where there's a community need for that based on the land needs assessment. So in a nutshell, and going back to my kind of first answer to your question, we're required to plan to 2051. So we have to show that we're accommodating growth to 2051. And we can't leave that short.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Now I'll go the second round, and Councillor Olson, you had your hand up first. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, just a point of curiosity. I mentioned that the motorized vehicle traffic will grow by 55% by 2041, which doesn't seem like an unreasonable expectation. But I was wondering if there would be a part of the official plan includes a community policing plan, because that amount of traffic, and I can predict there's going to be a lot of problems with speeding, and we're already at dangerous levels in some parts of the community, and we're heavy congestion at 5 o'clock in the center of Font Hill and different areas of town. I just wondered if there was any consideration given for that, to include that in the plan.
Through the mayor to the councillor, I appreciate the thought. So the official plan, however, is a land use planning document under the Planning Act. And basically the policies are triggered by Planning Act applications, right? So it's all focused from that perspective. So it doesn't go into the kind of operational type of situations you're speaking.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments on the presentation? Not seeing any. I turn to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive the delegation from Mr. David Hayworth, official plan policy consultant for the Niagara region with respect to the new regional official plan for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any other debate.
Okay, thank you. Last chance, Councillor. Any councillors? Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry.
And and he's gone. Thank you, Mr. Hayworth, for your presentation again. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to come and update you on the official plan. It's very much appreciated.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you can just give us a moment to place the presenter back into the waiting room. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, your next item on the agenda is the adoption of minutes, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the following minutes be read a first, second time to be adopted and as printed and circulated and read. 1. RC 10-2022, Regular Council, May 16th, 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, I'd ask if you can call for any errors or omissions.
Thank you. Any errors or omissions that any councillor has for the stated minutes? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote here begins with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to item 7 on the agenda. This is the request to lift consent agenda items. I do just remind councilors that if they wish to discuss the agenda item, they are not required to lift it. You only lift an item if you so choose to change the resolution attached to it. To you, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to ask if any councilors wish to lift any items.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any items on the agenda on the agenda list that any councillor would request to lift? And Councillor Hahn.
Yes, through the mayor, I just wanted to make mention actually to the clerk, section 8.2, the minutes approval for May 9th. I won't be able to vote on that because I didn't participate in that particular meeting. So just please note that.
Thank you. I'm just noting that you were absent from that meeting. You're certainly welcome to vote on the resolution as a whole, but thank you for noting that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor that would like to lift any consent agenda items? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the June 7th, 2022 council agenda be received and the recommendations therein contained be approved. To you, Mr. Mayor, this would be the time to discuss any of those items.
Okay, thank you. On the consented items, any discussion on any of the consent items? And I'll start with Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I have a lot of comments, all of them related to the financials, 8.3.1, 8.3.2, and 8.3.4. So I guess I'll just start with 8.3.1. And 8.3.1, with regards to Appendix 3, which is the Meridian Center, I'd just like to highlight the hydro costs there. We were within 1% of a $350,000 budget. Originally, when this building was built, it was a build by design, and the projected electrical costs at that time were all in the neighborhood of $500,000 for the first 5 years of operation. The staff at the MCC have done an amazing job, even during the pandemic and the vaccination clinics when we had the doors open. We had the HVAC running 24/7 to accommodate the requirements of the vaccinations. I'd just like to commend them on a great job they did, because we're just 1% over budget, which is astounding on a number like $350,000. So that's my comment with regards to 8.3.1.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on any agenda item?
I have comments on all these other items, but I just want to give the other councilors a chance.
We'll let you go one more, Councillor, and then I will take one also. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, it has to do with the reserves, 8.3.2. Like was mentioned earlier on, we've made a tremendous difference. And I want to thank all those involved with the finances and the financial committee that meets and handles all these numbers. They've done a great job. Thank you so much. But with regards to reserves, on page 3, it talks about December 31st, 2020. We've got a reserve amount of $13,348,541. Is that 2020 the correct date? Because that reserve amount is almost the same reserve amount as we have in 2021. So if the Deputy Treasurer could comment on that, please.
Yes, indeed. Go ahead, Deputy Treasurer.
Yes, through you, Mayor, that number is correct for 2020. That includes the reserves, which are found in Note 9 to the financial statements, as well as the obligatory deferred revenue, which is included in Note 5 to the financial statements. So in 2020, it was about 3.2 million in obligatory deferred revenue, 10.1 million in discretionary reserves and reserve funds and non-discretionary reserves. And then we've excluded the airport reserve because it's an unconsolidated balance that belongs to the airport. So it's in our financial statements, but not included in the town report.
Okay, thank you so much. That clears that up.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor. I have more questions, but you're next.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to comment on the next one on the agenda list, and that's 8.3.3, and perhaps the Director of Planning could also jump in at the end. Just a year-end building department report. It was great to see the revenue projection was a little off. Great to see it was the right way, 274,000 higher, and total reserves now in the building department is 1.7 million. Are we heading for the same year again in your estimation, or is it too early to make that prediction, Ms. Weens?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I mean, it's always difficult to predict, but so far this year, I think we're probably going to be on track, and we have had a couple of very large building permit applications that we've issued this year, which are unusual, and so they will too skew the numbers. But when we get the commercial development or large institutional development, such as the retirement home, those numbers are not what you get every year, and so they can sometimes put your numbers out of whack, but in this case, it's a good out of whack.
Very good, indeed it is. Thank you. Before I go back to Councillor Hildebrand, any other councillor want to comment on 8.3.3? Councillor Hildebrand, we're back to you.
Yep, I'm going back to 8.3.2 and 8.3.4. In the report, it says the target for reserves is 14.9 million. I'm rounding the numbers off now to make it easier. And it states that the reserves are 13.9 million. That's the reserves we have at the end of 2021, which meant there was a cash shortfall of $1 million. But you said that cash shortfall was because of a grant of $1.9 million for infrastructure that we haven't received. It looks like once we get the grant, that we'll have more cash than we have in the reserve target. So that's the first question. And then the second question, under grants, I could not find a $1.9 million infrastructure grant. So maybe the Deputy Treasurer could direct me as to how that all fits together. Because I'm sure it does, because we know how excellent our Deputy Treasurer is.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So the cash position, when we collect that receivable, we will have more cash than our reserves, and that's what we want. So unless the town had no other assets other than cash, there's always going to be some timing difference that you can find on the consolidated statement of financial position. So our accounts payable and accounts receivable fluctuate somewhat throughout the year, and that impacts the cash balance. But the important thing is to know that once that receivable is collected, there is at least enough cash to represent those reserve and reserve fund balances. So that's how that ties in. There are other items that impact cash other than just the reserves and reserve funds. And to answer your question about grants, the grant receivable relates to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Rural and Northern Grant. And the total grant is actually higher than the 1.86 million that you see as receivable. The receivable is just equal to the amount that the town had expended up until December 31st, 2021, but not received back from the upper levels of government. So it's not the total of the grant, it's just the total that was receivable at December 31st, 2021.
Thank you. That explains that. I'm glad it's more than, we're gonna get more than we need. That's good news. Thank you.
Okay, any other items by any other councilors on the agenda list? Consent agenda, sorry. I'm not seeing any. And Councillor Hildebrand, have you got any other you'd like to discuss?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much,
Oh.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I will turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This vote begins with Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your staff reports. And our first staff report, we do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0126, proposed changes to volunteer firefighter insurance for information, and that Council approve the on-duty proposal 2 coverage and the optional member-only insurance benefits provided by VFIS, and that Council suspend the Volunteer Firefighter Reserve Fund program approved through Bylaw 4313-2021, including minimum transfers to the Reserve Fund and expenditures from the Reserve Fund, and that Council approve a budget transfer of $10,379 from Fire Department Reserve transfers to Fire Department insurance. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions, comments on this report from any councillors? Not seeing any. Mr. CAO, it would appear that we found a better deal and we're doing an upgrade. Is that a proper assessment?
Someone built a better mousetrap, better coverage for less money, so it's just a win across. It's a win for our volunteers. It's a win for the taxpayer.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for those comments. And again, I don't see any comments from councillors. I will turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This vote begins with Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0133, potential support for proposed Niagara Region water pipe smoking bylaw for information, and that Council of the Town of Pelham consents to the passage of the water pipe bylaw of the Regional Municipality of Niagara, being a bylaw to regulate water pipe smoking in the region. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Any questions, comments on this report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the presentation and consideration of bylaws. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council for the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaw, do now read a first and second time. 1. Bylaw number 4466-2022, being a bylaw to provide for updated schedules of assessments, updated schedule of assessments for future maintenance, and schedules of actual costs for Big Creek Drain System. This is a first and second reading. And that Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do read a first, second, and third time, and do pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign, seal the bylaws. 2. Bylaw number 4459-2022, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136-1987 as amended for lands located at 952 Foss Road, east side of Victoria Avenue between Foss Road and the north of Sumbler Road to the south, legally described as part of Lot 18, Concession 11, formerly Township of Pelham, now Town of Pelham, with the Site-Specific Agricultural 51, A51 zone. File number AM01-2022. 3. Bylaw number 4460-2022, being a bylaw to declare the town-owned lands described in Schedule A attached to and forming part of this bylaw surplus to the needs of the municipality and therefore available for disposition. Lands between Weber Road and Chandler Road being part of Lot 14, Concession 13 in the town of Pelham, designated as parts 8 to 15, 17 to 20 on Plan 59R 9440. 4. Bylaw 4461-2022, being a bylaw to authorize the sale of the town of Pelham lands to Michael and Julie Kokelik or successors in title, the lands being described in Schedule A appended hereto, and to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute all necessary documents to complete the transaction. 5. Bylaw 4462-2022, being a bylaw to designate private roadways as fire routes along which no parking of vehicles or motor vehicles shall be permitted. 6. Bylaw number 4463-2022, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136-1987 as amended for lands on the north side of Port Robinson Road, east of Station Street, legally described as part lot 167, Geographic Township of Thorold, part of lots 17, 18, 19, Plan 719, Town of Pelham, from the residential multiple 1, 263, RM1 263, and residential development RD zones to a site-specific residential 2, R2 322 zone, Hummel Properties Inc., file number AM07-21. 7. Bylaw 4464-2022, being a bylaw to adopt an amendment to the official plan for the Town of Pelham planning area, Amendment number 14, Summersides Village, file number OPAM0221. 8. Bylaw 4465-2022, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136-1987 as amended for lands located at 690 Quaker Road in the town of Pelham for the neighborhood commercial NC zone to the residential multiple 1 RM1 321 zone with a holding provision zone. Upper Canada Consultants, file number AM 11-2021. 9. Bylaw 4467-2022, being a bylaw to appoint a court of revision on the Big Drain municipal drain system. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you, and I hope you have your exercise reading today, Madam Clerk.
Thank you.
On these 8 bylaws, any questions or comments from any councillors? And I see Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, I'd like to separate out item 6, which is bylaw 4463, and 7, bylaw 4464, for discussion.
Okay.
In other words, I would consent to the others with the exception of those 2. So,
yes, this is a request to divide, and it's just certainly a request. So I'm just noting that was the bylaw number 4463, 2022, and bylaw 4464, 2022. Did council, we'll deal with those separately after the rest of them. So council will be considering at this point bylaws 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. So on the remaining bylaws, is there any comments, discussions on those bylaws? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. And just for the ease of the record, I will use the same mover and seconder for all of the votes that we are about to undertake. So the mover was Councillor Kaur and the seconder is Councillor Hahn. And this is on, as I've indicated, those other bylaws, the first bylaws. And this vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. We will now consider bylaw, which was listed as number 6, and that's bylaw number 4463, 2022, If council wishes, they may discuss this particular bylaw.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Hahn, we will turn to you.
Yes, thank you. Through the mayor. So after additional consultation with the developer, my understanding is the developer wanted to appear as a delegation and missed by a short period of time. My understanding is that the planning staff often keep the developer abreast of situations whereby as we, with the progression of time, as things move towards the bylaw approvals, they would be notified. Apparently that was not the case, or seemed to be the case. So I know that this developer would like an opportunity to speak to council. I know that they have reached out to all of us in some way, shape, or form. But I do have some questions that I'd like to ask of the planning staff, so I will do that now. And that is, can planning staff confirm the projected density of neighborhood 1? I can do these individually or all at once, whichever your preference.
Ms. Weens?
Mr. Mayor, through you, what I can advise council is that the density of neighborhood 1, in accordance with the secondary plan for East Fonthill, is 54 persons per hectare, 54 persons and jobs per hectare. We have met with the consultant last week and they questioned whether or not we are meeting that target. We've reviewed the development applications that have been approved to date in neighborhood 1, and it indicates that we are meeting that target and exceeding it.
So further to that, then, that I would ask is what is the plan that's in place to in fact achieve that mandatory density requirement?
Mr. Mayor, through you, if I may, we review the development applications as they come in each of the neighborhoods in East Fonthill. And when we do the review of them, we ensure that they meet the density targets before we bring them forward to council for a recommendation for approval.
My next question is, would the approval of 2 roads through a medium density area of secondary plan negatively affect the potential density of neighborhood 1?
Ms. Weens?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, through you, in this particular case, we don't believe that to be the situation. There are options available for the developer for meeting the medium density targets.
And how so? So you say options available. Can you suggest what those might be?
So the official plan provides that medium density can be in a variety of housing forms, from townhouses to apartments. And the townhouses could be street townhouses or a stacked townhouse, or it could be in small apartments. So there's various options available to meeting the density targets.
So in the case of, as we all know, that this developer wanted to build an apartment building, and if there's 2 roads going through that, that makes it impossible to build the size of building that he wanted to build, thus not reaching his density target. So having that other road go through puts a whole pickle in the plan. The owner of this does not support it either. The owner of the property is not supportive of this either, is what I understand. But I have a hard time approving this at this point, when I know full well that this developer wanted to speak with council as a delegation and was denied because they weren't kept abreast of the progression of what would be in this agenda. So I think until we have, they've had the opportunity, I won't be approving this. And that would be for, I guess, both bylaws, right? The amendment and for zoning, and also to the official plan. So that's 4463 and 4464.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this bylaw that we're discussing right now? Councillor Hildebrand. Yeah, Councillor Hildebrand. Yeah, Councillor Hildebrand, you're being addressed. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Hahn. Originally, when this subdivision came up, there was a lot of questions, and it wasn't a unanimous decision. And I'd prefer to have the presentation of all the people relative to this subdivision come before us to make sure we've got all the facts before I make a final decision. So I'd be in favor of deferring an approval on both of these bylaws at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, questions? I see Councillor Wink.
Yes, so just to be clear, this developer did come to the public meeting and expressed his concern and his desire not to have two streets running through his property. I remind council that the official or the East Swan Hill Secondary Plan demonstration plan had these streets going through this property. This wasn't the property of the developer, and I'm not even sure if he owns the property at this point in time. So based on the demonstration plan of East Swan Hill, this council approved the proceeding of this to bylaw of this subdivision. So I'm going to still be in favor of these two bylaws.
Thank you. Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, as I pointed out in a previous meeting, and as was relayed to this council through Ms. Weens, and that is that the actual bulletin, the board that is posted and for all to see, all residents to see for several weeks and months prior to in the proposed plan sense, is not in fact what they're looking at now. So there has been a change. So this hasn't been the same plan since the beginning of time, and now we're just seeing it through. So there was a change. Admittedly so, and I think we need to acknowledge that and just hear this developer out for one more time. And what's the harm in hearing them out? It pushes it back another council meeting. So I think it just at this point it's the fact. I guess the part that irks me the most is that it was suggested that they weren't kept in touch by planning, that in fact this was going to be on the agenda. And I know that with all the other developers, they seem to know exactly what's going on because they are kept in the loop. So I'm not sure why this developer wasn't contacted to give them the heads up that they could have, in fact, met the time frame to be a delegation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So, Madam Clerk, right now we're just discussing 6, not 7, right?
Right now, I had understand each of them to be discussed individually.
Yes.
So we are looking at number 6, and I'm just looking to council to understand if they wish to vote on the resolution that's being presented before them, or if a councillor is offering a motion to defer.
Okay, Councillor Hahn? Well, you are.
Mayor, so I would want to defer 6 and 7 because they go hand in hand. One is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is one is the zoning bylaw amendment and the other is the official plan amendment. So
if council as a whole wishes to consider them all together under one resolution, certainly they're entitled to do that.
Okay, thank you. Is the rest of council prepared to put them together? Any objections to that? And I see no objections. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. So the motion before us is with respect to both bylaws listed as in number 6 and number 7. And again, I think Councillor Hahn is indicating she's bringing a motion to defer consideration. I just would need a seconder if that is Councillor Hahn's desire.
And Councillor Corr is indicating he will second.
Okay, so the motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Corr, is to defer consideration of both of these bylaws. To you, Mr. Mayor, for further discussion.
Okay. Any further discussion on this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote here begins with Councillor Hahn.
yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
That makes it a tie, and then it is defeated. That does bring you back to the original main motion. If council wishes, they can decide them together, but you are back to the original motions. And if you like, I can read that back into the record for you, or council can continue their discussion.
Okay. So Counselor, as the clerk has indicated, the motion was defeated. So now we're back to 6 and 7. Is there a council that wants to discuss these individually, or can we look at them both together? Not seeing Councilor Hahn?
Through the mayor, so can the director of planning just let us know, did you in fact reach out to this developer to let them know that this would be on the agenda? And is that normal protocol that you don't and that you have for other developers?
Ms. Weems?
Mr. Mayor, through you, I'm sorry, I'm not able to answer that question. I would have to speak with the planner who is in charge of that file to confirm one way or the other. And unfortunately, I was not aware that this question would be asked tonight, so I haven't had that opportunity to have that discussion with her. So I'm very sorry, but I'm not able to confirm that with you this evening. Certainly we do try to keep, applicants and the public informed when we are having reports going forward. It may have been that in this case, that did not happen. We try our best to do that. And if there was an inadvertent omission, we certainly do apologize for that. But, also, the agendas are public, and at any time they could have let us know that they wanted to speak, and we weren't aware of that either. So it's an unfortunate circumstance both ways. So, I do apologize if there was an omission, and, we will certainly try to ensure that that doesn't happen again.
So further to that, it was laid out to us that they in fact did ask to be kept in the loop, and that didn't happen. So if we move forward with this, just so everyone's clear, by moving forward, we're essentially saying that we are going to progress with this without giving them the opportunity to come back to us as a delegation because they missed the opportunity by one day and were denied because of our rules. They were denied the opportunity to present to us. So we're pushing it forward without hearing from them again, even though we always let our developers know, as you said, you try, and it's great that there's an apology, but that doesn't mean much to somebody who's trying to forge ahead with the development. So this is a very costly decision for this individual, irregardless.
Any other comments by any other councillor before we call the vote? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. If I just may so add one particular comment about our procedural bylaw and the requirements for delegations. The Clerk's Department did not have this information. However, just for context as well, when there has been a public meeting and people have spoken at that public meeting, we do not allow for people to come to speak again on the same topic unless they have new information. And I'm not sure if that new information requirement would have been able to be satisfied, but I'm not sure if that does help Councillor Hahn at all in your queries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
If council is ready, then this is for bylaw number 4463/2022 and bylaw number 4464/2022. We will use the original mover and seconder, and the vote can begin with Councillor Hahn.
No.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
No.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is a tie, and that is defeated. We will move on from the bylaws.
So,
Councillor Wink.
yeah, so just a question. So, this council approved this subdivision a couple of meetings ago to move forward. We're just approving the bylaw. How is it that we can reverse our decision from that previous meeting? I'll just ask that of Mr. Krebs.
Okay, Mr. CAO?
Well, so I'm worried that we're now in a procedural morass, and I'd like to offer a potential way out, if I may. Two things. One, Councillor Wink is correct. We're sort of we've kind of not followed through now. However, it's obvious that at least half, of the 6-member council, certainly half of the council would like to hear from the person we're referring to as the second developer. So I think the ideal thing here this evening is for someone to motion to defer any further consideration of this issue to the next meeting. Presumably, the second developer will ask to be on that agenda. And even though you've had a vote and that was also defeated, that will indirectly accomplish that outcome. For the record, though, and the piece I want to clarify is that I can't recall a single instance in the past 3 years where we've been, I think every single interaction we've had with a developer, the developer has owned the land and therefore has the right to call themselves a developer. And I had a meeting with this individual a month ago, 5 weeks ago. And at that point, they made it very clear that they did not own the land. And that's an enormous difference. Respectfully, I would say everyone on this call is a developer of the land if we have thoughts about what it should look like, but don't own it. So that's a fundamental difference in how this matter's proceeded. And it is an important distinction because someone who doesn't own the land could say, well, I'd like to develop it differently. But really, the way the system's supposed to work as a whole is we started off with a blank canvas, a lot of blank land there. And over the years, a lot of property has been developed in that area. And now we're getting down to brass tacks. We're running out of land and and so what happens is the table keeps getting set every time we approve a development. And so, for the second last one in the area, it's going to have an impact on the last one, i.e. 1 or 2 roads. But in this case, to the best of our knowledge, the person objecting doesn't have ownership of the property. So that's highly material. Nevertheless, and I think that needs some consideration in how it's addressed. But regardless of where council chooses to land, if we can refer the matter to the next meeting, then presumably we'll be at full council strength. In addition, I don't know if the person will qualify as a delegate or not. Madam Clerk has identified one potential challenge, but at least there's the opportunity. And I think it gets us out of the procedural difficulty we're in tonight, which if not rectified, I can see no outcome that doesn't involve the Ontario Land Tribunal, frankly. So from where I sit, that's the best outcome, to sort of bring it back another night and figure out the procedural thing with a delegation or not.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Councillor Hahn?
Yes, thank you, through the mayor. So 2 things. Number one, as I mentioned, it's a very costly decision for him. There's a significant deposit and obviously non-refundable. So if he isn't able to accomplish certain goals, there is a significant amount of money that will be transacted either way, right? So it's not nothing. There is monetary concern there. And number 2, if you require then me to make a motion to defer, then that's what I shall do.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I can bring certainly the motion to reconsider the matter for the following. I'm putting Councillor Hahn as the mover, and I am looking for a seconder.
Okay. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Kaur?
Thank you. And then this would be able to bring this matter back to the following meeting, and certainly we can be in contact with that developer. Is there any other discussion?
Any further discussion on the matter? Not seeing any.
Thank you. So for the vote to reconsider, I'll begin this vote with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Wink.
Reluctantly, yes.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do carry. We do have 4 yeses and 2 noes, and that does pass. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, your next item on the agenda is 14.1, and that is the notice of motion from yourself. Through you, Mr. Mayor, as you are the counselor who will be taking forth this motion, you will have to vacate your seat, and our Deputy Mayor Core will preside over this section of the agenda. To you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cord, you agree to accept your responsibility as
Yes,
Deputy
thank you.
Mayor?
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Mayor.
you. Madam Clerk?
Yes, so Deputy, the Deputy Mayor will be presiding, and if he is so inclined, you may go ahead and proceed with your notice of motion.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, I proceed.
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So council, my notice of motion is just a brief outline what my motion will be in 2 weeks, is I wish to bring forward a request that staff do a study and bring it back to council in ways that this council can honor this individual, Jane Haste. That will be that is what my motion will be in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does any other councillor need to add anything to that?
Madam Clerk? Oh,
Not seeing any. If it's okay with the Deputy Mayor, I'll move on to the next item.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. The next item is a motion being put forth by Councillor Olson regarding Ridgeville parking, and this is seconded by Mayor Junkin, and therefore he will continue to have vacated his seat, and this will be presided over by Deputy Mayor Core. Councillor Olson, would you like me to read your motion into the record, or would you like to do that?
Please do. Please read it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Whereas staff have been previously directed by council for the town of Pelham to prepare a bylaw regulating parking at the Meridian Community Center and other properties owned by the town of Pelham. And whereas the draft municipal parking study presented to council by R.V. Anderson at the April 4th, 2022 regular council meeting indicates that the Ridgeville parking options are consistently being exceeded. And whereas council for the town of Pelham believe expanding parking options would immediately improve the competitive position of important local enterprises. And whereas the town of Pelham owns a parcel of land on the southeast corner of the intersection of Effingham and Canberra, currently being used for storage and structures associated with water filling. Now therefore be it resolved that council for the town of Pelham directs staff to provide a report to council which details options for expanding the use of these lands to provide parking options for the shops of Ridgeville. And that staff are further directed to assess the cost of incorporating low-impact development LID characteristics into the design and cost of the potential parking lot, including but not limited to permeable pavement, specialized stormwater surface features, and potential use of botanical features to reduce runoff. And that staff are hereby directed to draft any closed session companion reports they deem necessary or appropriate to address legal ramifications and or cost valuations of the lands in question, and that the said report or reports are to be delivered to council by July 25th, 2022. To you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, for discussion.
Yes, to you. Councillor Olson, would you like to add any more to that motion or speak to that motion?
Yes, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I appreciate the opportunity to make this motion because I think one of our goals and objectives should be to create the conditions or help create the conditions for our small businesses to succeed. And one of the problems that has been arisen for the shops at Ridgeville has been parking, and it's been consistently over capacity. Every time you drive by there, they're parked on the neighbors' yards and all kinds of things, and they're actually using the site that the proposed site. I'm not to prejudice the report, but I would like to see a report on what we could do to assist this, because we do have the piece of land, and there is a potential, I think, there for a number of spots, perhaps to even double the amount of parking we have in Ridgeville. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Olson. Mayor Johnson, you seconded it. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Cork. Just that we have some months ago, I guess, probably at the beginning of my term, I had talked to the shop owners, and at that time, I had a local contractor just roughly draw up some parking spots. And if we go ahead with this, I'm sure the town study will show that we will have approximately 8 or 9 spots that we will be able to put in the east side of Effingham Street. And those extra spots would definitely help the shop owners conduct their business and have lots of room for the parking public. Thank you, Deputy Corr.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Now I open it up to the rest of council. Anyone have any comments? Councillor Wink.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I fully support this motion, and I also would like to make a friendly amendment to include that staff include in their report an option for a shovel-ready project to extend parking further down Canberra Road to the west. This was brought up in our parking report, and again, we don't have that many shovel-ready projects. If there was the opportunity for grants, it would be great to have a project on the burner to expand the parking even further. So I would like to add that amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Wink. Would that be a motion?
Thank you. Councillor Wink is suggesting this as a friendly amendment, and I would look to the mover and seconder if they are supportive, and then if all of council will be agreeable.
Councillor Olson?
Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I specifically, I saw that in the report and I specifically left it out. And my reason for leaving it out was it's a complicating factor. I felt it was a complicating factor, and speaking with the neighbors on both sides, they would probably not be in support of that. But having said that, if it's part of the report, you know, I would assume that that could be done, included in the report, I suppose. I'm not sure that it can be done by the 25th, but it's, I know the neighbors are on Canberra Road are not favorable to the idea generally.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Corr. I didn't haven't had the opportunity to talk to the residents. I suppose that we could include this report, and then when it came back to council, we could, if it was indeed we wanted to separate them, we could. So I wouldn't be totally, I wouldn't be opposed to this amendment being attached.
Okay, thank you. And back to Councillor Wink.
So I'll let you off the hook so I don't muddy the waters then. I'll withdraw that amendment, and we'll be making a motion further on at another date to add this onto further discussion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wink. Councillor Hildebrand, you had your hand up.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Corr. I just got a comment with regards. I'm in favor of the motion. Don't have a problem there. But I do cycle past this location at least 3 times a week because that's my homebound route coming down Effingham. And one of the things I note all the time is behind the shop that's at the corner of Canberra and Effingham, that what I call a big parking spot, because obviously there's nothing bigger than that in town, is always vacant. There's never any cars down. So I believe there needs to be some special consideration about that
which would get, rather than taxpayers footing the bill for all of that, so we can get more cars in there that they can go then to those businesses. Why aren't we asking why those businesses aren't using that parking lot that's beside Bob's Boys, which is on private property? So I would like to actually add that as an amendment to this study to find out, or to this report to find out why that isn't an option, and have that added in as an amendment, please.
Thank you, Councillor Hahn. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Hildebrand, to you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So this is an amendment to the motion to request that staff look into and find out potentially why that additional parking on that site is not being used. The motion is being put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. You can further debate that amendment.
Any councillors need to debate it any further?
Yeah.
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy
ahead,
Corr. Yes, at no time are we suggesting the moving of the water station. The water station will remain where it is. There's a green strip of grass between the water station and Effingham Street. That is where we are proposing the 8 parking spots to be installed so that they will not be interfering. Right now, lots of long weekends and lots of weekends, I do see people parking on the grass. I do see people parking in the water station, and they're not interfering, but they're in close proximity to the water haulers. If we go ahead and had a staff report that recommended taking this section of grass out and putting 8 parking spots in there, the water station will not be affected in any way whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anyone else? I don't see anyone. Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, thank you. The vote on the amendment begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
No?
That's a tie and it is defeat, so it goes back to the original main motion.
Okay, does anyone need to further debate the motion put forward? Madam Clerk, could we have the vote?
Thank you. So this is for the original main motion, and the vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
No.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
No.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry.
Thank you.
Thank you. The deputy mayor may vacate his seat, and the mayor may come back to his seat. And that does bring us to Councillor Wink's notice of motion.
Okay. Before we go any further, Councillor Corr or Deputy Corr, thank you for your services.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to the notice of motion being presented by Councillor Wink.
No, Councillor Wink, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be seeking to have both a draft report and bylaw for council's consideration to address the nuisance of issue of unsolicited advertisement, junk mail, and equivalent documentation. I'm specifically interested in a bylaw that would address resident concerns and complaints regarding newspapers that are delivered improperly and blow all over town, creating pollution, nuisance, and unsightly mess.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We look forward to the motion. Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I do have a motion being put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider a matter under Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act as follows. C, proposed disposition of land by the municipality for one item, file number L07 2021-05-S, property located in Ward 1. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on this motion? Not seen, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This vote begins with Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. If I can ask council to give me just a moment so I can stop the streaming and the recording.
Thank you. If I may take this time, Council Olson, did you get your IT program or problem solved? Have you been able to hear everything?
Pretty much. I missed a couple of things.
Oh.
Just need to turn the volume on.
Yep.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that we are now recording and the live stream is on. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wing, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that council during the in-camera session that council do now rise with report. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Okay, any discussion on this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that the Chief Administrative Officer be and is hereby authorized to undertake the direction provided during the in-camera meeting of June 7th, 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Okay, any discussion on this, council? I see none.
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and do pass, being a bylaw number 4468/2022 to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 7th day of June 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Any discussion on this motion, councilors? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting for June 20th, 2022 at 5:30. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. It is 7:45 and you can gavel out your meeting.
This session is
Good night,
over.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Nice, folks.
Well.
Right.